We are back in the beautiful, bright and lovely, horrific, brutal, bloody world of Gloomhaven. This is Jaws of the Lion, and it is the little brother of the biggest game of them all, Gloomhaven. In this video, I am going to show you how to set up the game and how to play the full game. But to do that, I might need to get some spoilers on camera. And I am just sorry, but I can't see how I'm supposed to do a how to play video on this game without spoiling anything. I am, however, going to try to block out as much information as I possibly can. But if you want to know how to play this cool little game, well, tag along. Depending on which scenario you are playing, the main setup will of course look different. But this here is the scenario number 5. The book we have here is the main scenario book. The book we have up here is the supplemental scenario book. Up here we can see which scenario it is and what the name of the scenario is. We can also see the goal of this scenario. We have an introduction text telling us where we are and why we are there. Here we can see a number with a text under. This text should be read when you reach this number out on the board. Meaning that when you reach this hex and interact with this door, you should read this text. And something on the map and in the scenario will trigger. Below this text we also have some special rules. These rules should be read at the start of the scenario because they will implement different things that are new and specific for this scenario. Here we have the map layout. The gray numbers down here is the main scenario book. The brown one is the supplemental one. And you can clearly see how they fit together and how they are placed. We have a conclusion text. This should be read when you have completed the scenario. And at the bottom we have some rewards. These are usually experience points, items, or something else that you acquire when you have completed this scenario. Down here we have scenario keys. These are the monsters that you will meet, traps, or treasure tiles that you need to place out on the map. As you can see here, I have only set up enemies and terrain on the first part of the map. This is because there are walls cutting off these areas. And your characters cannot see through walls. So they have no idea what to expect before they enter these rooms. So you start by setting up the area that you are actually in. And as you enter a new area, you will set up that area and so on. Up here you have the element board with the elements on. Over here we have the map of the city. Down here we have the enemies' cards and their ability cards. Next to the board we have all the tokens, meaning the coin, the damage tokens and so on. And I will tell you more about all of that in a bit. Now if we look at the starting area where we start this scenario in, we can see a bunch of different symbols out on the map. The ones with the arrows here and a little box, this is where you can place your characters. And you can place them anywhere you want to in this area. The little green spots out here on the map, these are the muddle and poison traps. Meaning that on these areas here, we should place out the muddle and poison trap tokens. We can see that we have some symbols where there are a green border on. These are simply obstacles. The blue ones is, like I said before, the doors. Over here, when we get to this area, we will need to set up traps. They look like this. Up here we can see a treasure. This means that again, when we enter this area, we should put a treasure token on that hex. A character can, of course, loot and pick up this treasure. And then we of course have the enemies. As we can see below the enemy symbol, we have some fields. If we look at these fields below the enemies, we can see that they have different colors, but some of them are also blacked out. The different roads here indicates how many players there are in this scenario. The top one is 2 players, the middle one is 3 players, and the bottom one is for 4 players. Depending on which color they have, you will face different types of enemies. The black one means that there should be no enemy on this hex. The white ones means that there should be one normal enemy, meaning an enemy with a white base. The yellow ones up here are elite enemies, meaning an enemy with a yellow base. Now, the difference between a normal enemy and an elite enemy is of course their stats, but I will show you more about this in a bit. But we of course also need to set up our player area. Now, at the start of the game you need to pick a character. With this character comes some starting ability cards. As your character grows stronger, you will be able to get new ability cards. You also need to have your attack modifiers. Again, at the start of the game, this deck will be pretty weak, but you will be able to grow and get a better deck as the game goes on. Down here you have your items. Items will not be a part of your character at the start of the game, so this is also something that you will acquire as the game moves on. And then we of course also have a health and experience tracker. The health part should be according to your level down here. So depending on which level you are, you need to set this to that value. Meaning that if you are level 1, it should be at 8. But if you are level 5, it should be set to 14. We do this by simply just turning this wheel. The experience is set to 0 at the start of the game. Up here you can see the name of your character. Here you can see your max hand, meaning the max amount of ability cards that you can have at the same time on your hand. Here we have the discard pile, meaning that the ability cards that you have played from your hand should be placed here once you are done with them. Up here you have your active card area. These are the ability cards that you are playing and activate right now. And lastly we have your lost pile. If you have any conditions, they should be put in the bottom right corner. We also need to shuffle the battle gold deck, looking like this. Then we need to deal out 2 cards to each player. And in secret the player chooses 1 card. On these cards you will have different types of challenges. And if you manage to complete these challenges, well, you will get a little bonus at the end of the scenario. But I will tell you more about that in a bit. Next to the player area we also have some player reference cards, just to help us out along the way. But we also need to set up the enemies cards. These cards here will tell you what the enemies stats are. We can see the normal enemies on one side and the elite enemies on the other side, indicated by gray and yellow. These cards here have different sides. And as you can see up here, we have a number. That is the level of this side of the card. Meaning that here we have level 1 of a Chaos Demon. Again, this is the normal side and this is the elite side. We have their life, their move value and their hit value. Up here we have any other conditions that might happen if they hit you. If we turn them around, we will have different stats because it is another level. For now we have level 1. We put them in these card containers here so we easily and fast can see the level that we are fighting. We do the same thing for all of the monsters that we will fight in the scenario. But then we also need to take that monster's ability cards. And we can see which monster it belongs to by looking at the text here. These cards will determine what this monster will do during its turn. As we can see, the Chaos Demon has their own deck, the Zealot has their own deck as well, but as this over here is a boss, they use the boss deck. So now we have set up this scenario. And if you have played Gloomhaven, you probably remember that the setup took quite some time. In Jaws of the Lion, it does not take that long time, because these scenario books cuts down the time of setup a lot and makes it a lot easier. A lot of the things is already out on the map and it's quite clear how to set it up. Also, this little container here with all of the little tokens cuts down a lot of the time because you know exactly where everything is. Your own little character area here is also quite fast, because just as in Gloomhaven, you have your own little box where all of the things are in and you can set it up quite fast. But now we are ready to start playing the game. But who gets to go first? Well, that is determined by which cards you are playing, but also which initiative the enemies will get. Let's take a look at a round. During your turn, you play 2 cards from your hand to your active area above your player board. Now, you need to be able to play at least 2 cards from your hand. If you cannot do that, you need to take a rest. But I will show you how a rest works in a bit. For now, let's focus on the cards and what they actually mean. This here is 2 ability cards from the Demolitionist. Depending on which character you play, your abilities will of course look quite different. But some of the symbols are still the same. On these cards, you can see a top part and a bottom part. And during your turn, as I said, you play 2 cards. But you need to play 1 bottom action and 1 top action. And you cannot play 2 of the same actions during your turn. You need to choose either 1 down here and 1 up there, or 1 down here and 1 up there. And you can play them in any order you would like to. Meaning that you could go with the bottom first and then do the top, or go with the top first and then go with the bottom. That is up to you. On these cards we can see the name of our attack up here. In the middle we can see our initiative number. And it is always the lowest one that will count. Meaning that during this action here, your character will have an initiative of 20. Now let's say that we want to do this action first. We would need to resolve it from the top to the bottom. We can see that we get to move 2 hexes out on the board. And then if we end up adjacent to any obstacle, we can destroy that obstacle. If we do, we get to strengthen ourselves. This effect will last during this turn and your next turn, as stated below. Strengthen will let you get advantage on your attacks, but I will show you what advantage means in a bit. When we have played our first action, we go on to our second action, the top action. As we can see here, this is an attack, and it will give us an attack value of 3, but it has a range of 2, and it will affect all the enemies within these hexes. Again, we have a clarification down here in the blue area. Once we have played this action, the card is lost, indicated by this symbol here, meaning that this card does not go in your discard pile, it goes in your lost pile and cannot be used again. If we look over here, we can see some symbols, 1 on the top and 1 on the bottom. And we can always choose to play these actions instead of the ones that are stated on the card. The top is an attack by 2. The bottom is a movement by 2 steps. Some of your cards will have this symbol here. This is a persistent bonus, and it will either last you to the end of the scenario or for as long as you have your little token in these areas. Meaning this one here. As you can see up here, it says that on your next 2 attacks, you add 2 to your attack. You take your little token and you place it on the first one when you have done your first attack. When you do your second attack, you move it to the second area. When you move it one more step, well, the card is done and you have used it to the fullest. But you see that there's also a symbol with a star here. This means that you will get 1 experience point. Meaning that on your little experience point tracker here, you now get 1 experience point. And as we can see on this card, there is no lost symbol. When there is no lost symbols, the card goes to your discard pile and can later be picked up again. Some of your cards will also give you experience when you have done an attack. Meaning that here you attack by 3, then you add +2 and you gain 1 experience if the target is adjacent to a wall. Other effects have even more abilities. Here you would get to attack by 2, then attack with the value of 1, and add push 2 and the model effect if you target the same enemy as your previous attack ability. So that's the way you play cards from your hand. You pick one card with a bottom or top action, and then you play another card with top or a bottom action. And like I said, you can only pick one top and one bottom, but you can play them in any way you would like to out on the board. Once the players have chosen what they would like to play, we know what initiative the players has. In this case here, the Hatchet had 18 and the Demolitionist has 20. But what does the enemies have? Once the players have played their cards in front of their board, we need to reveal the monsters deck as well. And we do that by simply flipping the top card over to see what it says. Here we can see what the name of this attack is. We can see the monsters initiative. And we can see here what they will do during their turn. In this case, they will move, but they will have 1 step less. And then they will, if they can, attack. But they will have 1 attack value less than their stats. If they can use any of the elements out on the board, they will also do a disarm effect on their target. This symbol down here means that once this turn is over, this deck needs to be reshuffled. Once we have figured out the initiative order, we need to sort these tokens by that order. In this case, Hatchet goes first, and then Demolitionist, and lastly, Chaos Demons. In this round here, the Zealot and the Boss will not take part of the battle, so we can actually remove them for now. This here will give you an easy overview of the order during this turn. So now we know the initiative order, meaning who will get to go first, second, and so on. And now it's up to us to do some movements out on the board. But what can you actually do? Well, you can do quite a lot. You could, for example, move your character out on the board. As we can see, there are hexes out on the board. Each of these hexes represent 1 movement point. The Hatchet gets to go first during this turn, and he has a movement point of 1, meaning that he can simply move 1 step. Some items will provide you with extra move points. Just see if the card is active or not before you use it. Some cards will also give the ability to jump. When a player uses the ability to jump, they can jump over obstacles, they can jump over traps, enemies, hazard terrains, but they cannot jump through walls. Some items will also provide you the jump ability. Again, just mind if the card is active or not. If a character or an enemy steps on a trap, that trap will activate. And depending on if it is a damage trap like this one here, or a poison model trap like this one here, you will either get the effect or the damaged. The damage will be the same amount as this scenario's level +2. If you move into a trap and get damage, well then you lower your health by the amount. And if you enter a trap with a condition, you place the conditions on your player board. in the bottom left corner. In this case, a poison and model. And then we also have obstacles out on the map. These ones can be jumped over, but they cannot be moved through. So if you have the jump ability, well, you can jump over them. Some characters, like the Demolitionist, have abilities that will be able to destroy this obstacle. If you destroy the obstacle, you put a destroy token on the hex that you have destroyed. Some of these obstacles will have several hexes. If a character or an enemy ends up on a trap, that trap is then removed from the board. Out on the map, we have walls. These walls cannot be moved through in any way, because, well, you are not the Hulk. To enter a new area and pass a wall, you need to move into a door hex. As soon as a character enters a door hex, the door will open, and the new area is exposed. We need to place our trap, treasures, or enemies. And remember that whenever you move onto the section that has a number, you need to read the text in the scenario to see what happens. Some scenarios will have objectives. These are marked out by a yellow hex. These objectives will have, well, objectives that you need to complete to be able to finish the scenario, all depending on what the scenario says. In this game we also have difficult terrain. This is indicated by a purple border around the terrain. Each movement into a difficult terrain requires 2 movement points instead of 1. But effects like push and pull or jump are not affected by difficult terrains. So now we know how to move. We use the values that we have on our cards, we add any items that we have, and then we move that amount of steps. If there is an obstacle in our way, well, we can jump over it, we can destroy it, or we just have to move around it. Now that we have moved, we can hopefully do an attack. So now we would need to look at our attack action. We can see here that we have an attack value of 3 and we have a range of 2. This area here is the area of effect of this attack. As we can see, the Demolitionist here is 1, 2 steps away from this enemy, meaning that they are within range of hitting this enemy. The area of effect would be this whole area, meaning that the Demolitionist can actually hit and reach all 3 enemies. So now we know that we are within range, we can reach our enemies, but how do we know how much damage we will actually do? Well, this is where the attack modifiers comes into play. For each enemy that you are going to hit, you need to draw a modifier card. As we can see, the base value of this attack is 3. When we draw the top modifier card, we will have a value. In this case, +1. Which means that our first attack will have a total attack value of 3 + 1, giving us a total of 4. Once we have applied the damage from this result to the first enemy, we draw our second modifier card. Again, we were lucky, we got a +1. So our second strike will also have a total value of 4. Our third and final strike, we also need to draw an attack value. But this time we can see that we were not that lucky, because this symbol means that we totally missed our target. Again, we can see the reshuffle symbol down here in the bottom right corner, meaning that now we should reshuffle this deck. In the modifier deck you will find many different values. Some of them will give you ×2 result, some of them a -2, some of them a total miss, ±0, and so on. When or if you manage to hit any of your targets, you need to put out some damage tokens. On each of these enemies there is a number. This will determine where to put the damage on their stat board. So if you hit the Chaos Demon with a number 1 on it, well, you simply put the damage in that square. If you manage to reach their HP, the enemy is dead and removed from the board. Every time you manage to kill an enemy and remove them from the board, we place out 1 coin. Some of your attacks will also have the target symbol and a number after. This means that this attack will let you target 3 enemies instead of 1. Some cards will let you push your enemy away a certain amount of steps that is stated on the card. And when you push your enemy, you push them away from you, meaning that you cannot push them to the side. Besides push, where you push an enemy away, you can also pull an enemy closer. Again, you pull the enemy to you, meaning that you cannot pull them out to the side. When you attack your enemy, you of course need to have a line of sight, meaning that you need to be able to actually see your target, but also to be able to draw a straight line from your hex to the enemy's hex, without any walls blocking line of sight. And walls are the only thing that blocks line of sight in this game. Meaning that any other obstacles or terrain or whatever might be in your way does not block your line of sight. When you're out fighting your battles, sooner or later you or your opponents will be affected by some type of condition. The immobilize will, immobilize you. And if you get this one, you cannot move before the end of your next turn. The stun will also let you stand completely still, but in this case you cannot attack either. Here you can still shoot or fight, but here you are simply completely stunned. Again until the end of your next turn. The model will give you disadvantage against all your enemies. And you have this until the end of your next turn. Poison is a bit different, because here all attackers gain +1 attack value against you. The only way to remove this is through healing. The disarm means that you cannot attack until the end of your next turn. The wound will make the character suffer 1 damage at the start of each turn. And just like poison, this one is removed by healing. But they're not all bad. We also have strengthen, and this one will give you advantage on all attacks, but it is removed at the end of the next turn. Some cards will also have the loot ability, and a number next to it. This means the number of hexes away that you can loot an object out on the map. But you can also loot in another way, because at the end of your turn, if you are standing on any coins or treasures, you will be able to loot that hex that you are standing on. Sooner or later, you will get cards with element symbols. There are a few different elements, and depending on how the symbol looks, different things will happen. For example, when you play this attack here, you will activate the fire element. To activate the element out on the element board, you move it to the strong column at the end of your turn, meaning that you won't be able to use this element on your turn. But some of the element symbols will have a cross above them, meaning that now you can use that element if it is active out on the element board to enhance that action. At the end of the round, the element tokens will move 1 step to the left. When it comes to the far left, it is inactive and can no longer be used. As I said, during this scenario, you can also use items. You can have any number of items that you want, but you can only bring a certain amount of items into the scenario. If the item is attached to the body, feet, or head, well, you can only have 1 of those items, because you can only have 1 pair of boots on at the same time. If it is a weapon that is carried by hand, you could have 2 of them, because you have 2 hands. The items, however, are restricted to your level, divided by half and rounded up. On these items we can see the name of the item, an artwork of the item, and the buy value. The sell value would be half of this. In the middle we see a text stating what this item will do. Down here in the right corner we can see some symbols. We already know what the lost symbol means. This means that once you have used this item, well, you cannot use it anymore during this scenario. But this one here means that once you have used this item, you need to put it to the side. And once you have done a long rest, you can activate this item again and use it again. When a player have done their turn and played their cards, we put the cards in the discard pile to the left of our player board. If we have not played an action with the lost symbol, because if we have used an action that has this symbol here, the card will go down in your lost pile instead. The difference between discard and lost is that, well, the discard cards are not lost for this scenario. And once you have done a rest, you will get these back on your hand. The lost cards, on the other hand, well, they are lost and will not be brought up to your hand during this scenario again. And that's why it is quite important for you to plan which card to play. Because if you just play a lot of lost cards and burn through your deck, your character will become exhausted and is removed from this scenario. But don't worry, they will come back in the next. So you cannot just burn through the deck. You need to save those lost cards for when they really, really matter. But how do you actually rest to get your discard cards back on your hand? You have two types of rests. There are short rest and there are long rests. A short rest will let you take up your discard pile on your hand and at random take one card to put in your lost pile. Now you have the cards up on your hand again and you are ready to go, but you do not get any more benefits than that. But if you do a long rest, you actually get to take the discard pile up and then you get to choose which card you would like to put in the lost pile. You also get to reactivate any items that you have used from before, plus you get to heal 2 wounds. The downside of a long rest is that your initiative will become 99 and you cannot do anything else during this turn. Now that is a player's turn. You play 2 cards from your hand. 1 bottom action, 1 top action, or 1 top action and 1 bottom action. As long as it is one of each, you can play it. You can move first or attack first or whatever you would like to. Out on the board you can move the amount of hexes that your card says. You can use item to enhance that value, and the same thing goes with the attack values as well. If you can attack, well, you need to draw a modifier card. Depending on which number you will get, well, that is the attack value that you will hit your enemy with. We of course also need to look at the enemy stats to see if they have any shields or anything else that will make it harder for us to hit them. But we still have something that will either enhance or make our attack worse. And that is our advantage or disadvantage. Now you can have advantage or disadvantage in different situations. If you, for example, are trying to make a ranged attack, but the enemy you are trying to hit is standing adjacent to you, well, you would have disadvantage. Because, well, it's just harder for you to shoot a ranged weapon when the enemy is that close and interfering with you. The same way as you would have advantage if you would become strengthened. This is an effect that you can get through cards or different abilities in the game, but enemies can also muddle you. If you become muddled, then you would have disadvantage. You will become muddled through different traps or different attacks from enemies, or even by your own fellow players. They might be able to muddle you every now and then. And they might not be by purpose, but it happens. But what does it actually mean? Well, if you have advantage, you get to draw 2 modifier cards and then pick the best result. But if you have disadvantage, Well, you would have to pick 2 modifier cards and then choose the worst result. So make sure that you are within good range and not become muddled. So that was a player's turn, and it's actually not that complicated, right? A player picks 2 cards from their hand that they would like to play, a bottom action and a top action. And whatever order you want to play these actions in does not matter, it's up to you. Some of these cards will let you move, some of them will let you attack, others will let you loot or even heal. It's all depending on which cards you have on your hand, but also what character you're playing, because these action cards are not the same. And they will also evolve as the game goes along. You will be able to change these cards as you get more experience points. Just remember that you can only bring in a certain amount of cards in each scenario. And that is the number on the top of your player board in the right corner. But that is where this game, in my opinion, becomes brilliant, because you can really build up the hand that you would like to bring into the scenario. When you read the text on the scenario, you understand what you need to bring in. And here you can really build up your tactics. You can run in and attack, or you can attack first and run away. You can destroy an obstacle, you can jump, you can do so many things out on the board. And it really gives the players many different combo combination. And besides the card itself, you also have the items. And the items can be quite powerful because they might give you that extra heal, extra move step, or extra attack value that you need to get the job done. But now we have looked at a player's turn. But how does an enemy turn work? Before the monsters does anything out on the board, we first need to figure out which character they are focusing on. The monsters will always focus on the character that they can perform an attack on. This of course depends on if they have ranged weapons or if they need to be adjacent. If a monster can reach several characters with the same amount of movements out on the board, we will go according to the initiative order. And it does not matter if the monsters actually can reach the character at the end of their movement, as long as that character is closest and they have a possibility to make a future attack on it, they will move towards that character. In this case here, for example, these 2 monsters here, they won't move, as they're already adjacent to their enemy. They can reach their enemy and they can attack it. Same thing with the Zealot over here, it's standing next to the Demolished, so that one will just attack. But with this Chaos Demon here, we would need to do some calculation. We can see that we are 1, 2 steps away from the enemy. But here we are 1, 2 steps away from the hatchet as well. But here they would need to step in the traps. And they are not stupid. They don't want to get hurt. So this one would move and make a hit on the Demolitionist. When the monsters focus, they are not affected by line of sight. Meaning that if they can't see the enemy, they will still move towards to the one that they have a possible attack on. But if a monster fails to find a valid path towards their victim, well, they won't move at all. If it would look different out on the map, like this for example, this monster would not be able to move in and make a hit on the Demolist. But they still can reach the hatchet. Meaning that this Chaos Demon here would actually move over the trap to come adjacent to the hatchet and make an attack. According to the initiative order in this example here, the Zealot is next in turn. And as we can see on the base, this is an elite enemy. Meaning that now we should look on the right side of their stat card. We can see that they have a base move value of 2. But on their ability card they have a move value of -1. Which means that now they will actually only have 1 movement point during this turn. But as they already have an enemy within reach, they will not move. Because the enemies are lazy bastards, and if they can hit you, well, they will, without moving. And if we look at their ability card, we can see that they have an attack value of -1. When they hit you, they will also poison you, and if the air element is active, they will add 1 to the attack. Let's say that in this case it is not. So now we have a base value of 3, we have -1, giving us a total of 2 hit point from the Zealot to our little character here. But remember, we also need to draw an attack modifier for the enemies. In this case, the Zealot got a +1. So now we have a base value of 3, an ability card with -1 giving us 2, and a +1, meaning that the Zealot will hit us with an attack value of 3. And if we do not have any shields or anything else protecting us now, we will take 3 damage. Next in turn, we have the Chaos Demons. Here there are several Chaos Demons. Now, they do not activate simultaneously. As we can see, out on the side of the little standee here, we have a number. This number represents in which order they will activate. Going from the lowest, which is 1 in this case, and then to the highest number. So this Chaos Demon here will activate first. And as we can see on the bases, these are normal enemies, so we should look at their left side under stat card. They have the ability of muddle, meaning that when they hit you, they will muddle you. If we look at the Chaos Demon's card, it has a move value of -1, and their base value is 3. So this bad boy here does now have a total move value of 2. 3 minus 1. And the enemies will always move the easiest and closest way they possibly can to be able to hit one of their enemies. Again, if we look at their ability card, they have an attack value of -1. Their base is 3. So now this bad boy here has a total attack value of 2. The symbol here means that if any of the elements are active, they will disarm you. Just remember that you need to draw the modifier deck. In this case we were lucky because this was a miss, meaning that this Chaos Demon will not hit the enemy. Every now and then you will face a boss. The boss stats looks a little bit different. Usually they are split into 2 different halves. On one half you can still see the boss health. But in this case, it is actually 10 health points times the characters that are in the scenario. In this scenario, we had 2 characters, meaning that this boss will have a health value of 20. As we can see on the move value here, there is no move value, meaning that this boss will not move, no matter what the cards says. It can still, however, be pushed and pulled. And again, on the attack value, we can see a C. This means that the attack value is the same as the number of characters. Up here, we can also see a bunch of different conditions with a drawn line over. This means that this boss is immune to these conditions. Out here to the right, we can see a number followed by a text. These numbers correspond to the numbers on their ability cards, meaning that whenever 1 is drawn, we do 1. Whenever 2 is drawn, we do 2. And remember that the bosses have their own special boss deck. Every now and then, the enemies will also attack you with curses. But what does that mean? Well, this means that you need to shuffle in a miss in your modifier deck, while some of your own attack will have the ability Bless. This means that instead of a miss, you get to shuffle in a ×2 hit in your modifier deck. Woo! And that's the way an enemy turn would go. Pretty much simplified, but of course there are different circumstances here where the movement will be a little bit hard to determine where they will actually go. But to keep it simple, they will go to the closest character out on the map that they can hit, even if there is a trap in the way. Meaning that if they have a close route to a character that they can hit, but the only way to come there is by going into a trap,
well, they will go into a trap because they really want to hurt you. But if there is any other way for them to reach you without entering the trap, they will do that because they do not want to get damaged. They're not suicide soldiers, you know. And of course, just like we have line of sight, they also have line of sight, meaning that if there is a wall in the way, well, they cannot hit you. Obstacles, again, they can shoot above them. And when you do any sort of attack, either if you attack an enemy or if the enemy attack you, be sure to always look if they have any kind of armor or if you have any armor that you can use to protect yourself, because these are small details that are usually forgotten. And if you make an error, well, you make an error. But don't get too obsessed about it. I mean, this is a game and it's just about having fun. I've seen people out on forums writing down how sad they are because they can't really figure out the enemy movement exactly every time. Well, so be it. Just have fun with this. When you have finished the scenario, or failed the scenario, because you are going to fail some scenarios, they are not all that easy. But if you manage to actually complete the scenario, finish it and come out victorious of it, well, you usually have some end of scenario bonuses. This means experience points, or maybe you have managed to pick up a treasure, you got some money, you might be able to buy some equipment. So let's take a look at that. If you manage to complete a scenario, you should first read the conclusion text. This will tell you what you found out and where you will go from here. Then we need to take a look at the rewards. In this case here, the characters will get 25 experience points each, but we also got a new location. If we did manage to pick up the treasure, we now get the number stated below the treasure on the map. This can be found in the back of the glossary book. But I will not show you this now because that would just be spoiling too much. When you get more experience points, you show that by adding to this line here. Right now, I do not have that much. I'm still on the first level. But when I go above 45 experience points, I will level up. And a few things will happen. I will be able to choose new cards to get up on my hand. They need to be the same level or lower than what I have now. Meaning that if I level up to 2, I could choose from the level 2 cards. But you can only choose one card at a time to get up on your hand. So choose wisely. But when you level up, you also get to take one of the perks. And as you can see here, there are many different perks. This up here, for example, remove 4 0 cards, means that you get to remove 4 0 cards from your attack modifier deck. But you can also remove minus cards or replace some of them or add new ones, all depending on how you want to build up your attack modifier deck. Plus, from now on, you get to use the new health value. We were level 1 before with 8 health, now we have 9. But then we also got a new location, remember? The Corrupted Research 6 on B4. This means that we should now bring out the map. And we should find B4 on the map. Plus we need to take the sticker number 6, where you can see it says Corrupted Research. Now this sticker should be put out on the corresponding place on the map. When you complete a mission, you go back into the city. When you do that, you have to encounter a city event. And these event cards are quite cool because you will get some kind of text stating that something happens. Maybe you meet someone, you buy something, or well, anything can happen really. And then you will get some choices. Depending on which choice you will choose, different things will happen. You might get things or you might lose things. And when you are in town, you can also buy some of the available items by paying the value stated on the card.
Just note that all the items will not be available from the start of the game. Now, do you remember the battle cards I showed you at the start of the game, where the players picked one in secret? If you manage to complete whatever the text says, you will be able to get a little benefit. Because on your character sheet here, we can see that there are some squares. If you manage to complete one of these, well, you manage to check out one of the boxes. Whenever you manage to check out 3 boxes, you will be able to get one of the perks. As you rise in level, the scenarios and the enemies that you're going to meet will of course become more difficult. And this is calculated in a quite good way, because you take the character levels in the group, divided by half and rounded up. And that is your scenario or monster level. And this is just such a good way of balancing up this game. And you can, of course, if you want to, make the scenario easier or harder. And you simply do this by changing the little monsters here. Remember I showed you the levels here? That will be the scenario level. And if you want it harder, well, you simply just turn the disc around. If you want it more easier, well, then you would turn it on the other way. And in that way, you can yourself determine if you want a really hard challenge, a normal challenge, or a little bit easier. And that, my friend, is how you play Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion. We play 2 cards from our hand. We see what initiatives the enemies have, then we line up the initiative order. And then we simply play the cards that we want to play, or we do whatever the enemies are going to do out on the board. The enemies will focus on killing and hurting you. If they can get into reach of you, meaning that even if they step on a trap, well, they will do it because they do not like you. But if they can avoid it, they will. When we manage to complete the scenario, well, we will get some rewards, some experience points, maybe we get some gold, some items. Then we can go out to town, do some shopping, we can upgrade our characters, if we have the experience points for it, of course. We get a new path out on the map that will show where we will go next in this little scenario book. I loved Gloomhaven. I loved it so much that I finished it twice. And it is one of the main reasons that I got into board gaming for real. But I think I like Jaws of the Lion even more. Because here the story is just a little bit better. Let's face it, Gloomhaven's story, well, it wasn't the best. This one is even better. Here you have really interesting characters and you want to know how the story progresses. Plus, it is much less. It's faster to set up. You can play it in basically 10 minutes. I mean, Gloomhaven took a long time to set up. And even though I love Gloomhaven, at the end I was a little bit tired of dragging out that big box. This smaller, faster box with the scenario books basically takes no time at all to set up and just start playing and get into the game. We still have the same beautiful artwork, we still have the same dark world. The rules from this to Gloomhaven, well, there's really not that big a difference. There are some things that are removed from this game, but in the bigger picture it's kind of the same. And this game here is really focused on the players actually just sitting down fast and starting to play the game. There you have it, my friend. That was Jaws of the Lion, Gloomhaven. I am so happy to be back in Gloomhaven. I have missed Gloomhaven a lot, and it is a thrill for me to get it up on the table again and just keep on playing it. And I can't wait until I get to try Frosthaven as well. That game looks like a beast. But if you want to try out Jaws of the Lion, if you want to know more about it, well, there will be links down in the description, so be sure to check that out. Or just Google Gloom and you will get Gloomhaven, because it's pretty much everywhere.
But that was the video, my friend. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, comment, or whatever you want to do. Most importantly is that you keep on spreading that board gaming love I know you all have. Peace out, my friend.